I'm very excited to have Stacey Bobber come and present next. Stacey is a friend, and her family is a patient, and she's a pediatric critical care nurse by background and has been a leader of our pediatric cardiovascular program at Children's Wisconsin for many years, and she's worked in the medical industry as well. But she's a mother to 3 beautiful children, and her husband David is here with her today, and she's been an extremely huge support in terms of philanthropy as well to our program, which allows us at Children's Wisconsin to participate with programs like Boston and Philadelphia in a collaborative. It helps us support events like this that we can help educate people, and it helps us produce videos that we share nationally with other urologists who want to learn more about bladder exstrophy. It helps support research. There's so much of what philanthropy does to help us be better and to spread the word of what we do and to host events like this. So I've invited her to share some of her experience and motivation with us today. Stace.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm excited that it's me between you and a break. So hope you're listening. I'm excited to be here. As Dr. Krieger so kindly stated, my role first and foremost is as a wife and a mother to a bladder exstrophy kiddo. But my story is kind of unique because I was a pediatric critical care nurse at Children's of Wisconsin to begin. So you'd think that our story might be easier, right? Because I worked there. Truth be told, it's not, and I'm hoping a few things that I'm going to share today are going to resonate with you. Maybe you've been through them, but also excitement about what we can do for the BE community and tell our story. So I'm going to get a little bit vulnerable, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my family. So as you can see on the image here, this is my awesome husband, and our second child, this is Hudson in the picture. Our path in bladder exstrophy was not a straight line, as one would think, and yours might be the same. So when I was pregnant with my second child, Hudson, I was super sick. I had the pleasure of being the manager of the Heart Institute at Children's of Wisconsin. Talk about philanthropy. A lot of people give to the Heart Institute, right? And so I was busy every day. But it was interesting, during all of my ultrasounds, no one ever saw a bladder. And it was funny, to be honest, that they were like, it's not a big deal. I'm sure it'll show up on the next ultrasound. Has anybody had that experience? They're like, I'm sure it's fine. Yeah, raise of hands, like we've been there. Well, I'm a pediatric nurse, and when we don't see something on an ultrasound, it's usually not normal. And so at the 8th ultrasound, I told my husband to just stay home. I said they're probably not going to see the bladder again. And so I actually met with our cardiology team. And I said, look, we're at a center of excellence for cardiac care. Where can I go when we don't find a bladder? And they said, hey, you got to meet this Krieger guy. That's really what she said. She said, hey, he's really good at what he does. He recently came to Children's Wisconsin. I think you should meet with him. So I advocated. I advocated for my unborn child, and I raised my hand during our next ultrasound, and I said, can we speak with Dr. John Krieger? Have you ever heard of him? And they did. Thanks, John. Yeah. They had heard of him, and they called him right away. And it was interesting how that ultrasound, once again, we didn't see a bladder, but they pulled me into a private room. Did that happen to anybody? Did you get pulled into a private room to have a conversation? Because they wanted to have a conversation. They were going to tell me some really big news. And remember, I told my husband, don't worry about it. You can stay home. I've been sick this whole pregnancy. I keep throwing up about 45 times a day. It's another appointment, right? In that moment, it was so important to me. I usually sit at that table and I'm telling families that your child's going to be born with half a heart. And I'm telling them what to expect in that journey. And I'm counseling them and saying, this is a mountain to you right now, but we're going to get through it together because we have the best here. And Dr. Krieger got to do that for me. And he said, hey, guess what? We have the best here. And we're going to do this together. And here's what your child has, and here's what that means. That was so cool. Can you imagine? For me, and I don't know if you remember this, I shook his hand and I said, thanks so much, this is great. He called my boss after and said, hey, I just met Stacey. I'm not sure if she's okay. Why did I feel that way? Because I had hope, right? What you've heard in all the presentations today is hope. Hope that these kids can do anything. Rachel spoke about it right away. She's lived it. That's all I wanted for my child, is hope and a chance to live a normal life, right? And that's what my family got to be a part of. We got to be a part of a center of excellence. My husband works for a great company, and when they found out about our son, they said, don't worry, we will fly you wherever you need to go to have that care that you need. And we just smiled and said, we're already there. We don't have to go anywhere. But how do we get there? We get there through philanthropy, right? We get there by telling our bladder exstrophy story. Don't let those cardiac kids have all the fun, right? But sometimes that means just sharing what is bladder exstrophy. Having our kids work with maybe the hospital and telling that marketing story that you often see on social media. My husband and I were willing to do that when we were in the hospital because it was really important to us to tell that story, because philanthropy comes in many different ways. You see, the other thing here I wrote is loss of perfect. Hudson was here earlier, and if you'd ask him, he may say he is perfect. But I feel like as a mother having a baby, we have this great vision of this perfect child. I'm going to have sleepless nights. I'm going to feed them. They're going to grow up to be the next president. But in that moment, I did have that loss of perfect. Dr. Krieger was excited. It was actually palpable. Do you know why? Because he knows what he's doing and he's so good at it. And he has this great team around him. That was comforting, but I still had to go through those stages. So loss of perfect to me was that we were just going to be on a different journey this time compared to my oldest child. And then control the controllables. I loved the parent videos, how they said, hey, one step at a time. We're going to get through this together. And I think that's why I've had the opportunity to speak to so many families and say, hey, here's what I want you to bite off right now. Here's what you should expect for that first surgery. Let's worry about X, Y, and Z later. So control what you can control. I didn't tell Dr. Krieger he was going to be in the next picture, but it's really a team approach, right? So what works for you may not work for me, and may not work for Hudson. So one thing that I think is really cool at every appointment, it's a team approach. Dr. Krieger and his team will tell us, hey, try this. I actually might call him a couple weeks later and say, hey, that failed miserably. But it's okay, right? If we don't try, we don't know. And when we do try, we're going to help the kiddo who hasn't even been born yet, who has bladder exstrophy tomorrow, or whatever your child's diagnosis may be. This picture is really important to me because the picture that you're seeing of me and my husband and our surgeons it was a tough day. That day, my child was in surgery. It was his first surgery, and he was there for a long time, 10, 12 hours. Remember, I'm a cardiac nurse, so guess what? The last patient to leave the OR waiting room was my patients, and this time it was me. So talk about a turn of events. I've been there. So it was interesting to be the family on the other side and understand how important it is to not just have great surgeons, but this takes a whole team. We need to have great anesthesia. We need to have great postoperative care. We need to have great outpatient care, and some of that takes dollars and branding to do so. Oh, who loves the Spica cast picture? Does that bring flashbacks? Does anybody have PTSD from the Spica cast? My favorite part of the Spica cast is when they took it off and they asked us if we'd like to keep it. We said no. Thanks. Our journey wasn't easy either. Hudson had really high fevers. We actually spent time in the emergency room every single month in the year of 2017. This picture here is Hudson with, of course, more antibiotics, pushing around his own IV pole in the hospital. But somebody said it best, these things build you up for the next thing, and we haven't really been back since. Okay, the real goal today is philanthropy. I like to show pictures. Somebody said rock climbing at the rally. Hudson loves rock climbing. He's such an active kid. Nothing stops him from doing what he wants to do, and I think that should be a resonating goal that we all have here today. But philanthropy, it doesn't just mean dollars, right? So my husband and I had the pleasure of having a golf outing put together for us to support what we were going through with our child. And it was great to have a resource at Children's Wisconsin to say, hey, what can we do with these dollars to be impactful in the BE community? And so Marianne Kessler has been a great contact for us. She was the boss I talked to. She found out that my son had bladder exstrophy right away when I met with Dr. Krieger. And she's been our contact for Philanthropy. Remember, I worked in cardiac, so I know what philanthropy means. I know when families stand up and say, I'm willing to share our story so that we can reach more families. Because by having a small community all go to these same centers, we're learning together, and that's how we as a family also become the center of excellence. So how does philanthropy fit you? Maybe it's just for my company matches work that I do every year. And so I make sure the work that I do, my company's matching, and I'm sending that into our philanthropy dollars for the urology community and what we do in the BE community. So as you think about that today, just know that philanthropy is not as big as you may think. And what can you and your family do to help tell this story and grow what we're seeing today so that we can remember Rachel's story earlier. And then what does that mean for your patient tomorrow or the mom who has a baby who's diagnosed today? Thank you for listening. I think they did okay, right? Now it's time for a break.
You did perfect.